This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So our topic one, if you see web services, let's start with web services. Um, so before starting the session, my suggestion is, if you didn't go through the demo sessions, please take the demo recordings from Harsha Academy, and please continue. Please watch the demos. So where we clearly explained each and every topic, what integration is, what Mulesoft is, what how the use cases work, and life cycle. We have discussed deep about life cycle and the roles, job roles, and as well as a few questions that any candidate may have, like what are the type of roles that we can apply, and what is the course duration, and what will be the outcome of the course. Everything is discussed in the demo sessions. So please take the demo recordings from the Harsha Academy. Um, today's topic, actually it should start from discussion on JSON and API-led connectivity. So I'm, as most of the candidates are not attended the demo sessions, I'll start from topic one. So what are the web services? What a web service is, and SOAP versus web, SOAP versus REST, and discussion on JSON. So I'll go through about these topics as well. So to find more details about these topics, you can take the recordings from Harsha Academy. Yeah. So web services, what a web services is. So communicating between two applications. So if you want to communicate between two applications, so web services are mostly used while communicating between two applications. So consider if there is an application A and there is an application B, and these two applications want to communicate each other over the internet. So what is the means of transportation, how these can be communicated, how application A have some data and application B needs some data. So consider application A is completely built on Java. The application A, the programmer is good in Java, and he programmed an UI where completely he developed in Java, and application B needs some data from this application A, where application B is completely developed on .NET. So application A sends, if application A sends the data in Java formats, where Java standards or using Java syntax, the application B will not be able to understand or use the data. So to resolve these problems, web services came into picture. So application A, so the programmers set some standards to transfer from one application to the other application. We use web services. Web services are nothing but transferring data from one system to other system by using some standards. So whenever an application wants to transfer some data, uh, transfer transfer some data to some other application, he has to maintain that, he have to maintain that standard. He have to follow that standard to send the data. So this is about web services, to send the data by using some standards. So what are those standards? What are the web services? Web services are categorized into two: SOAP web services and REST web services. If you see, so these running notes have all the details, more on definitions, what web services and its definition of the web services is. SOAP web services. What is a SOAP web services? The abbreviation of the SOAP web services is SOAP is a simple object access protocol which is developed by Microsoft, where completely SOAP web service is an SOAP web service is completely XML based. So transferring of data and transferring of data from one system to other system is completely done in XML format. um, XML format where it has some structure. So this is a SOAP message structure where it has SOAP envelope, SOAP header, and SOAP body. So SOAP is an XML based. So the key takeaways from here are: SOAP is an XML based. SOAP has SOAP envelope. It that the tags, the how the tags looks like is SOAP will have the SOAP envelope, SOAP header, and SOAP body. So whatever the body that you want to send, it you will be sending inside this body tag. If you want to send headers, if you want to send some headers, nothing the headers are nothing but metadata for that specific resource. Sorry. Um So the metadata will be sent in headers tag. Envelope is a start tag when SOAP message structure. So this is the message structure of a SOAP. SOAP web services. If you mostly if you see these are the differences between SOAP and REST. So when you come to this is about SOAP. When you come to the REST, right? REST is a representational state transfer where it's an architecture based. I didn't put the definition of the REST here. Okay, fine. So REST is it can be XML, where REST APIs can be the input. The input can be the body can be XML, JSON, HTML, multipath form data, anything. So the REST APIs are so how an API looks like we will discuss. So the REST API, the input of the message format for the REST API can be anything. And performance, when we compare the SOAP and REST, the REST will be it gives good performance. Why? Because in SOAP the bandwidth to consume to send the data will be more. Why? Because every time if you want to send some data, you have to send. So consider my application A and application B want to transfer the data. I'm using a web service. That web service is SOAP web service. The SOAP web service is nothing but XML based. So if there are no headers as well, I need to send the header nodes with empty headers. If there is no body, I need to send the body with empty body. So but when it comes to the REST web services, if you don't have any body, you don't need to send any body. So I will show you how the REST API look like, and how the exactly how REST APIs message format looks like in REST APIs. In REST is completely HTTP based, HTTP protocol based. So these are the few differences between REST and SOAP. So by these blocks, you can understand more about the differences between the REST, what is REST API and SOAP web services are. So when let's start with REST API. So what a REST API is? So our sessions will completely revolve around REST APIs, and we will be doing n number of REST APIs in our Mulesoft. In our session, consider we will be doing 15 to 20 APIs. We will be developing 15 to 20 APIs, not 15 to 20 APIs, more than 15 to 20 APIs, so that you will get hands-on on what a REST API is, and how to design the REST APIs, how to build the REST APIs, how to deploy the REST APIs using Mulesoft. Not only REST APIs, Mulesoft, the source can be, as we discussed, the source can be queuing mechanisms or any scheduler based. We will discuss that as well. So when it comes to the REST API, so the REST APIs, where exactly the REST APIs comes into picture. So the REST APIs comes into picture. We expose an API. Each API will have specific functionality. Let's consider this is a resource, correct? So docs.google.com/document/d, and there is a unique ID here, correct? Unique ID/edit. It's a resource, correct? It's an HTTPS based protocol. What is a so each resource will have host. Host is nothing but this, whatever the resource that we are going to the API that we are going to prepare, you're going to deploy on specific server. So how an API will look like? So when you see an URL, if you see this is a URL, you get the protocol, then you get the host name, then port, then the resource. If you have any URA parameters, these are the URA parameters, and if you have any query parameters, these are the query parameters. So what is a URA parameters and what is query parameters, we will discuss. But so this is a resource, this is a URL, correct? So you are going to do the URL, you are going to prepare the APIs. So this is an API. So URL is nothing but an API. So each API is going to have a specific functionality, correct? So if you see, so this is an API. So what is the functionality of this API? So functionality of this API. So the functionality, when I trigger HTTPS with a host name, this is the host name. Docs.google.com is the host name. So port, as it is HTTPS, the port will be 443. So for HTTPS based the port is always 443. Um then when it come to the resource, so the resource is the most important part, where up to here it can be same. So we can deploy n number of resources in the same server. So up to here it can be constant. It varies depending upon the resource. Now my resource name is document. So inside, up to here, I went to Google server. So when I trigger this, I was in Google host. Okay, fine. So go to this resource. Okay, when you are doing coding in such a way that, okay, documents is a place where I go to the documents place, /d is a resource. Up to here it's a resource, and here it's a unique ID. So unique ID is a URA parameters that we pass in the resource. So after unique ID URA parameters, again it's a static resource name. So here URA, okay, let me discuss URA parameters first and come back to this resource. So so the okay, what exactly a URA parameter is? So in resource, if you are in a resource, if you are sending some dynamic values in a specific resource, is known as URA parameters. Query parameters are nothing but you already have the data from this resource and you want to filter out the data depending upon the query parameters that you sent. So you have the data. Consider, I'm giving a simple example. So there is an employees table, employee IDs table. Not employee IDs table. Okay, employees table. So you prepared a get resource to get all the employee details, and you want to filter out the employee ID, and you want to pull out, do you want to apply any filtration on employee department, so not employee department, depending upon the department, you want to filter out the employees. So what you do is you pass the department in the query parameter, and you will fetch the data. If you pass the department as sales, you get the employee details of all the employee details who are in sales. URA parameters are the dynamic values that you are going to send in the resource. So if you see here, right, so from here to here, the total, it's a resource. There is no URA parameters here. Why? Because the URA parameter starts something like this. After resource, there will be a question mark, and then the query parameters starts like this. After the resource ends, there will be a question mark, and then the query parameters get started. Okay, so this is a resource. What is the functionality of this API? This is the resource API. This is the terminology which ultimately we'll be talking about a URL. So this specific API, what is the functionality of this API? The functionality of this API is go to Google server and fetch the document that is some extension file, and show it in the UI. So this document is stored somewhere. Consider this document is stored somewhere from the Google side. It is stored somewhere in the MongoDB or Cassandra DB or MySQL DB, whatever the formats that Google is following, they have done it. So what is the functionality of this API? Should go into that specific, go to that specific you are able to see my screen, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me copy this API and put it here. Yeah. So what is the functionality of this API? The functionality of this, whenever I trigger this API, the functionality is go to Google server, wherever this data with this unique ID. This is the unique ID, correct? So this is the unique ID for this specific doc that is passed in the URA parameters. So the Google will be developing an API, something like this. Google has already developed an API. Unique ID. Remove this edit. So you have seen this, right? Wherever, depending upon this ID, the Google is going to fetch uh, the document and display it to us. So let's see. Let's copy this, and we'll just for an example, I'll do this. I'll copy this. When I go and trigger it in a new tab, Google, what exactly the functionality is? Go to this resource and fetch this ID, whatever the data with this ID in the database, and display it to the on the UI. So this is what we displayed. Let's see if we have any. Let me create a new one and create a new document so that I get a new ID. Let's see this one. It's a new document that I created. Where the ID is changed, right? You see this ID and this ID is changed. So the functionality of this API is go to the specific resource. Depending upon this id depending upon this id, you fetch the data. So when I trigger this api, I copy this and I put it in a specific resource, a specific tab, hit it, I'll get the same data. Whatever the testing I have triggered, I'll get the same data. So the functionality of that resource is to go to the Google server, fetch the whatever data that is there, and display it on the UI. So that is the functionality. So this is how URA parameters are nothing but the dynamic values that we send in a resource. Query parameters are also dynamic values that we send for filtration for a specific resource. So not only that, for an API input. So let's start. So the functionality. So as we are discussing, when we trigger this, we are getting this response. So how exactly for a REST API, what can be the input, what can be the output, what are the inputs that we can give, and what can be the outputs that we can expect for a REST API. So methods get, post, put, patch, delete, we will discuss later what exactly they are is. So consider input. Input for a URL. So input for an URL is a host name where you are going to deploy your application. Here docs.google.com is the server name, is nothing but the host name. Port name is 443. Resource name, if you these resource names are user defined, you are going to, depending upon resource name only, the functionality varies. URA parameters are the dynamic values that you send to a resource to form a resource. Query parameters are used for filtration. So these are the inputs. If you see, inputs are nothing but dynamic values, are nothing but our inputs. Here our inputs are URA parameters, query parameters, input headers. Headers, how to send the headers in so headers are nothing but metadata for this specific API. You want to additional information, if you want to send some additional information to this HTTP protocol, HTTP API, if you want to send some additional information, so what consider like transaction IDs or any client ID enforcement, client ID secrets, any authentications that you define, that additional informations that you will be sending in headers. Yeah. And body is the format if you want to send some data. So here completely we are getting, in previous example that we discussed, is completely getting data. We are not sending anything to the Google, we are just getting data from the Google. So how to send the data, what are the formats that we can send? The sending data, most of the middleware in middleware world, right, most of the things, the exchange will be happen using JSON. The application A will be communicating to the application B by using JSON. What JSON is, how JSON structure will look like. The abbreviation of the JSON is simple um, uh, JavaScript object notation. So how it looks like, we will see moving forward how a JSON will look like. So input body can be a JSON or XML or multipath form data or text plain. You can send anything as an input to an REST API. And output, so we have sent this input. So depending upon this only, you are going to define your functionality. Consider your functionality is to post some data, to send some data into the database, to send some data into the SQL server. So what is the functionality of your API? So how you are going to define? First is designing an API. So here your functionality is to send some data to the database. So how what is your first step? Your first step is nothing but you are going to prepare a REST API what is the how your API should look like. So you are exposing an API where it sends the data to a database. So how we are going to send? So first you have to give the host name, port name, resource name, whatever the resource name that you prepare, slash employee insert, or post employee details, so anything. So what it does, okay, let me prepare a sample URL, to send some data. I'll replace this one. So yeah, here I'm posting, I'm doing some so my host name as well, I will use localhost. Localhost is nothing but my if I'm using my local machine, I use localhost. 8081 is my port. Any port, you can define any port. 8081 slash post employee details. So this is anything. So this is my resource. What is the functionality of this resource? The functionality of this resource is to insert the data into the database, correct? But how, what need to be inserted? We need to insert the data. The database needs employee ID, employee department, employee salary, those details, right? Those details will be passed as the body input. Everything is an input. So input, so how we are going to pass those details? So input will have the body. Body, what we are going to send the body? Employee details, sorry, employee details as JSON. We'll send in body. So once we trigger this API, so what this API does, it goes, connects to the database. Depending upon this JSON, it inserts into the database. That's the functionality of this API. So in our Mulesoft, in our sessions, we are going to design n number of APIs by uh, we discuss on by doing different POCs on different components. As said earlier, we will be doing nearly 15 to 20 APIs, and yeah, sorry for that. Yeah. So we'll be designing a number of APIs using Mulesoft. So these APIs, right? These APIs can be done in Spring Boot as well. By using Spring Framework, we can design an API. We can design an API using Spring frameworks as well, Spring Boot. But using Mulesoft, it is easy to design, deploy, and maintain the applications. So designing. Any questions? So how these are the inputs. Input for an API. Output is same again. Output can be anything. Output can, you will be having output headers as well as output body. Consider another example where I need to get the employee. Yeah, I need to get the employee details from the employee table. So what my input will be? I no need to give any input. I just need to connect to the database and get all the details. I just need to run the select query, select star from employee details table. That's it. Yeah. Whenever let me sample post, sample get, sample post, sample get. Getting employee details. I no need to give any inputs. I no need to give any body. So my output body will be JSON with list of all the employees, all the employee details. Correct? List is nothing but array of employee details. You'll be getting array of employee details in as output JSON. So any questions? So here key takeaway is REST API. What are the how how the REST API look like? What are the input for an API for a URL? Inputs for an API and output of an API. What is the functionality? How we define each functionality of an API? Depending upon the functionality, we design n number of APIs. So for each functionality, we define API that is known as it's completely microservice architecture comes into picture. For each small use case, we design an API and we deploy our applications. So there where microservice architecture comes into picture by following the REST APIs, API-led connectivity model. Any questions? Inputs of an URL, output of an URL is how exactly we send, how exactly we are going to design an URL and expect an output from that we expect from a URL. Okay, I'm moving forward. So REST APIs. So when you see REST API, it has methods. So what is each API will have a specific method. If you see this functionality internally in the backend, when I inspect something, when I inspect this, where is inspect? Give me a moment. Inspect. Control Shift I, yeah. Okay, I'll check that and I'll update you. So each API will have a specific method depending upon the functionality you are doing. Consider I'm getting data from the database. Here you are going to define it as a get method. You are sending data into the database. You are going to define it as a post method. You are updating data into the here for updation we have two methods, put and patch. The difference between put is patch is an update, put is an override. So you are going to override on whatever that you have. Patch is nothing but you are making an update on whatever the details that you have. So if you have the employee details, your patch is an update method that you are going to update on employee details. Put is you are going to override on the employee details. Delete, you are going to delete on the specific employee details table. So depending upon the depending upon your functionality, you are going to define the methods. Yeah. Moving forward, so these are the few examples where get method, it's 127.0.0.1 is also localhost. Localhost 8089 employee details. Give me a moment. Yeah. Inserting, if you are inserting some examples, as we already seen the same examples here. So what exactly a JSON is? Yeah. 22. Okay. So I'll give you brief on what exactly a JSON is, and what topics we are going to discuss tomorrow. We'll see now. So JSON, JavaScript object notation. So most of the web services, as we discussed, web services are categorized into two types: SOAP web service and REST API. REST is nothing but architecture based. REST APIs. SOAP web services completely XML based. The transferring of the data is also will be XML based, where you have SOAP message structure that have SOAP body, headers. When it comes to REST architecture, you have REST APIs. The input of the REST APIs, it's an URL. The input, the dynamic values for a resource, it can be URI parameters, query parameters, body, and headers. So these are the dynamic values that you can pass as input for a specific resource. Resource here in the terminology here, this is a resource. Specific functionality, whenever you are doing a specific functionality, when you hit something and you get out of something, I'm calling it as a resource. Here I'm calling this as a resource. Get API, when I hit this, I'm expecting an output, list of employee details, employee IDs with all the details. When I hit this, I'm expecting that inserted successfully as an output. Here I'll pass the input JSON as the body to insert the employee details. Correct. So what exactly the JSON? The transformations from one system to other system in the REST, right? It will be completely done in JSON. Um uh, it can be done in XML or HTML, JSON, anything in REST. But mostly all the organizations, 95% of the transformations of HTTP REST based protocols, REST API based, the body, the transformations will be the transferring of data, the body will be JSON. Not only uh, sorry, this JSON. Let's see how the structure starts and different type of structures in JSON. So JSON JavaScript object notation. So if you see, right, let's consider. Uh, so JSON starts with flower bracket. JSON. So it starts with the flower brackets, ends with a flower bracket. It's an object. So this is one type of we call it as the terminology. When you speak on JSON, right, the terminologies are more important. So when it starts with an flower bracket, ends with a flower bracket, it's called object. If you have knowledge on Java, right, what exactly an object is? Object is an instance of a class, correct? So it specifies something about the class. Similarly, here as well, it's an object. Starts with a flower brackets, ends with a flower brackets, called object. Not only that, most of the thing you have seen this, right? When we use this square braces when we use array list, correct? So the input or output. So this is a JSON formats. The input of an API can be object or list the output of an API can be a JSON, that is an object, or a list. So here the list. What is a list here? List of what? List of what data types? It can be list of strings, string 1, string 2, string 3. These can be the output. Input or output, I'm telling. List of numbers, list of objects. What is an object here again? This is an object. List of objects, comma, object again, comma, object again, object. List of object. List of objects, list of strings, list of numbers, list of objects, list of hybrid. It can be anything. It can be string, can be number, can be number, or it can be object. Input and output, the JSON can be, this is the formats that you can define any input. So if someone says JSON input, the JSON, it may not be only object. It can be list of strings, it can be list of numbers, list of objects, list of strings and list of objects. Anything can be the input. So what exactly goes in this object and how to define key value pairs when someone says about the JSON, right? The most used word is what is key value pair. What is key and what is value? We will discuss what goes into the key and what goes into the value. We'll discuss in tomorrow's session. And not only that, tomorrow's session we will discuss on these things we discussed. So tomorrow's session we'll discuss on API-led connectivity. So what exactly an API-led connectivity is. So we design an APIs, we design different APIs. So what is the architecture that we need to follow, so that what are the architectures that Mulesoft follows to segregate these APIs, and we'll see Anypoint Studio, how exactly the studio will look like, and we'll design a simple API to send take something as input and send something as output. We will design a simple API in the studio. Yeah. So these are tomorrow's topics. Any questions?
No questions. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll meet tomorrow, right? At the same time?
At the same time, yeah. 7:30 AM IST.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other question?
So you send us the recording, right?
Yes, sure, definitely. Recording will be sent by the Harsha Academy.
Right. Okay. We'll have to call Harsha. Okay. All right. Also materials too, right? Recording
Yes.
and the materials. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Sure. We'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you have any questions regarding the codes duration and all, like please speak to Harsha Academy, or put your questions here. I can answer.
What is the duration?
He's asking what is the duration of this course?
The duration of the course is 45 days.
In 45 days, we'll be expert, right? We'll be expert in Mulesoft, right?
Yeah, definitely. If someone gives you some use case, you will be definitely able to do that. You will be playing around with the APIs.
Yeah. Any questions? Do you have Gopal or Kalpana?
Charan?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, real-time scenarios will be there in this
Yes.
demo. I mean, in this online classes.
Yes. Right. I'll be explaining about real-time.
Real-time use cases.
One moment. Few examples. The real-time examples connecting to different systems, taking data from the SAP system and putting that to the Kafka environment or integrating to other Salesforce environment. So different use cases, real-time use cases, we'll be discussing at the I think at 15th or 20th day of the session, we'll be discussing on those things, Gopal. So in the initial days, we'll be mostly concentrating on developing, understanding how getting hands-on on the Anypoint Studio and Anypoint platform, and getting hands-on on few generic connectors like database connectors and other routing modules. We'll understand what exactly Mulesoft uh, provides us to program, and then once everyone are good and strong enough to design an API on their own and deploy the API on their own on their specific Anypoint platform, so we'll move forward with the real-time complex integrations, where we have different integrations to different third-party applications, different mappings. I'll provide you a, a real-time scenario how you are going to get the FS functional documents and mapping sheets and details of different third-party applications, and connecting to that third-party applications we'll discuss once we are strong with all the services that Mulesoft exposes, all the components and all the modules that Mulesoft exposes. And
How many connectors? How many connectors you are going to cover?
Yeah. So I have that presentation as well. Let me pull back. Okay, let me open the studio and connect it back. Show you. So to give a brief overview, the connectors, the generic connectors, the first we are going to discuss on HTTP connector, and then HTTP listeners, requesters, database connectors, schedulers, um, um, then Salesforce connector, SFTP connector, file connectors. The use case is the interface, right? We call it core. See, in the core, we are going to cover all this whatever the connectors that are available here, the batch jobs and all. We are going to cover, especially connectors level. Salesforce, we are going to connect. HTTP, we are going to file SFTP, yes, and database, yes, and a few more connectors. Amazon level S3, I think. So I have used S3 also. There is a use case with S3 as well. We are going to connect the S3 connector. We are going to fetch the files from the S3 bucket and use in our Mulesoft flow.
Are you going to talk about Apache Kafka also?
Kafka connector, mostly it's not open source connector. We'll see on Kafka. I'll try to do some setup on Amazon AWS, the Kafka setup. If I'm good, I'll try to do the Kafka connector. I'll try to, but I'm not sure because Kafka connector, it's not open source. It's not free. It's not only enterprise edition. Wala can use the Kafka connector. I'll try to get that. Or
That's
else I
very
can.
important. Yeah, that's very important for us basically. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I'm
I'll
wondering. Yeah.
do some demo if I have some organizational creds, or if I have some by using different creds. I'll try to give the demo on Kafka connector. Yeah, that helps, right?
Do you have any plans to explain real-time project in this course?
Yes, yes. As I said earlier, right? We'll be giving you a use case. I'll be giving you a problem statement, and I'll giving you the use case. So we will depending upon the use case, we'll discuss. I will give you uh, uh, a weekend time or 1 week time to develop that interface on your own. You can ping me back if you are not able to do that interface, or if you are stuck with any questions or any uh, doubts while doing. So after that, we will discuss one weekend. We don't have the weekend sessions, right? Okay. In weekdays, we will be discussing on those interface, whatever the problem statements that already assigned as an assignment, we'll be discussing on what. It will be a real-time assignment, real-time problem. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yep. Let's connect tomorrow. Thank you.